Hi, my name is Dr. Rayshawn Ray, aiming to speak truth to power, and this is my daily thought. Raping of women runs deep like the racism that birthed our nation. This upcoming week, the birth of a nation finally hits theaters nationally, right, and internationally. After a long awaited acclaim, winning awards, getting the highest amount of money from a film festival, all of this Oscar acclaim that was going on, and is actually put in place to essentially tell the story of Nat Turner, who led one of the largest slave revolts in American history. I will go see the film. The Nat Turner story needs to be told. It's also interesting that in 1915, so 101 years ago, that the first Birth of a Nation came out. One of the first films that was a silent film, black and white. Had an all-white cast, but had black characters. White individuals who dressed up in blackface, right, to more or less highlight black people, but not like skin, because no one's really black or white, right? So not like brown skin like mine, but literally like black, right? Like black tar on a person's face. And showed very stereotypical caricatures of black people, whether it be picking their feet, eating watermelon, eating chicken, things that people, regardless of race, do on a regular basis. I mean, I don't know too many people who don't eat chicken. But these are some of the stereotypes that played out. And of course, this was put in a time period where after the Civil War ended in 1865, and from 1865 through 1877, when we were entering Reconstruction, there was a lot of racial progress where you all of a sudden had blacks, particularly throughout the Carolinas, in the Maryland, the mid-Atlantic area, who were getting into Congress, who were getting into politics, right? Like Mario Small, for example. And so we saw a lot of that progress, right? All of a sudden we have presidents come in, Woodrow Wilson being one of them, who then took us back, right, in terms of implementing Jim Crow laws and other forms of legalized discrimination to prohibit black people from making progress. And I think that's something that people don't realize. I mean, we had, a decade at best between slavery and essentially separate and unequal facilities, right? And so that becomes extremely important. So 1915, we saw the classic Birth of a Nation. And for decades, this was one of the most watched films. And now we have another film named the same thing, A Birth of a Nation, showing a different side to what was happening, right? And of course, the original Birth of a Nation, part of the reason why it was so controversial is because it showed what would happen if black people were able to lead, right? So one of the classic scenes is a black man trying to rape a white woman, right? And instead of being raped by him, and again, this was a white character or a white man in blackface as a black character, instead of being raped, the white woman jumped off of a cliff type mountain and died, essentially committing suicide rather than dealing with that. And at the end of the movie, here comes the KKK to save the day. Right. And so this film was one of the most watched films. It was watched in the White House. Right. And people were like, oh, we have to do something. Right. This is what could happen to our country. Right. And so now we have this new Birth of a Nation. And, I don't think that it's coincidental that the raping of a black woman by a white man and slave owners that triggered Nat Turner's revolt, him leading one of the largest and most influential slave revolts in human history, is now underscored by the writers and producers and the actor of this new Birth of a Nation, who were accused and one of them actually convicted initially of rape. See, the problem is that by only focusing on Nate Parker because he's the famous one, see, we miss an important piece of this story, right? And this is where the media oftentimes misses the mark. See, essentially, by all accounts, what I gathered is that Nate Parker and his roommate, one of his best friends, essentially ran a train on Nate Parker's ex-girlfriend, right? Or a woman that he was dating. And a train is when more than one man in this regard has sex with one woman, right? Other people know it as a gangbang. These sort of terms that we use to kind of throw out there. And when I think about this, I think the way that conservatism and sexism run deep, not just in religious institutions, or even in educational institutions, but in male-dominated spaces. One of the things that I did that was extremely important to me is that I worked for the Office of Women's Affairs at Indiana University. Some of the most important work, professional work I've ever done in my life. And what I did was I trained and supervised a group of selected undergraduates by Dean Yvette Alex Asenso, who is now the vice president at the University of Oregon. And what they did was they went out across campus and across the community to do workshops on the prevention of sexual assault, rape, and violence against women. And we ended up getting a law change, right, in Indiana. The law actually stated at the time that if a person was intoxicated, primarily women, that they didn't have the right to consent. Now, when you hear that, what it suggests is that, oh, yeah, that's right. People shouldn't be able to consent if they're intoxicated, right, if they're drunk. But instead what they meant was that women gave up their right to consent. And so this was part of the deep part of what was happening there, right? And so what's interesting is when I think about this in the context of when I was studying fraternities, when I was studying athletes, when I was studying other male-dominated spaces. And again, these sort of things happen whether or not people are in fraternities or on an athletic team or not. The point is that these were the spaces where we might see some of these issues exacerbated due to the fact that men control certain spaces, the fact that the gender ratios are skewed, more men to women, or oftentimes more women to men, right? There are these certain dynamics that play out. And for Nate Parker and his business partner, whose name is Jean Celestine, and I think what's important is that Jean Celestine was originally convicted of rape. And then when the woman who had been victimized and survived that ordeal didn't want to testify again, then he got off the second time. And for Nate Parker, he got off of rape because they said that, oh, he had sex with this woman before, right? As if a woman instantly when she has sex with a man gives up all of her rights from there on out about the interactions that they have. And this is the thing. A lot of people actually think these sort of things. And so this is what's problematic. And so in some respects, being found not guilty of rape is like police killings of unarmed black men being justified, right? And part of the reason for this is that a lot of people think, men and women, think that when women say that they have been sexually assaulted or raped, that they're instantly lying, that they have something to gain. In what world do we live in where a woman who comes out and says she's been sexually assaulted or raped has something to gain from the ordeal? Right? In fact, what studies show is that 98% of women who are sexually assaulted are telling the truth. Right? Women who are sexually assaulted and raped are no less likely to lie about that than a person whose house is burglarized, right? Or a person who had a vehicle accident or had their, that got robbed. But see, this is the key point of this, is that we can talk about individuals, but instead we should focus on institutions. See, it's not coincidental that Nate Parker and Jean Celestine were wrestlers at Penn State, the same university where Sandusky was molesting boys in the Penn State football shower and locker room on a regular basis for years. And people's silence became their acceptance of the victimization of marginalized groups, whether that be boys or women in these contexts. So we cannot separate those things. That from an institutional level, people were responsible, that college campuses can be very detrimental places for women. That some studies show that 1 out of 3 women are sexually assaulted and or raped on a college campus every single year. 1 out of 3. Right? These are supposed to be places of higher learning. Right? But instead, some people view it, these are places where young men go to sow their royal oats. Right? And so what we need is a transformation. For men going from trying to conquer women to collaborating with women. So we need to shift the discourse on interactions between men and women from conquering to collaborative. Part of this is changing the language that people use. When I'm fortunate to travel around the country to talk to male groups, and I talk about this work that I've done around sexual assault and rape, part of they say, well, Ray, this is corny if I come out and ask a woman while we are in this moment, hey, are you okay with me moving forward? And I say, that's exactly what you should do, right? That's where you get the respect at, right? See, part of the problem is that for some reason we have all this conversation. And then what happens is that it's what I call the gray boundaries of sexual assault and rape. It's the intimate spaces. Because see, most rape and sexual assault occurs among people who know each other, right? Don't get me wrong. The person drives up in the van and snatches people off the streets, yes. But a majority of rapes and sexual assault occur between people who already know each other, people who are supposedly friends or relationship partners. And it speaks to the fact that we go from having conversations to all of a sudden not talking, because men, their goal is to conquer, to go from first, second, third base to home without necessarily having a detailed conversation, to keep wearing a woman down, to take off a part of clothing and keep trying to go through that process, right? Instead of being collaborative in the process, that's actually what we need, is to change the language to be collaborative in these intimate spaces, right? But see, this is the thing. Men see all this stuff all the time. Women do too. About the way women should be treated, about what they should wear, about how men should treat women, right? In the advertisements we see and the things that we see on TV. And see, part of the response I get when I talk about this stuff is people say, well, men get raped too. Well, yeah, they do. But see, this isn't an all lives matter rally or argument, right? Similar to police killings, we're talking about the disparities. We're talking about the fact that women are raped at a significantly higher rate than men, similar to the fact that unarmed black people are killed by the police at a significantly higher rate than white people, right? And so what we have to understand is that intersectional identities are complicated and complex, but they must be addressed. The victimization of women's bodies, like the victimization of black male bodies, must be properly addressed and put into a proper context. The time is now for all of, this is the thing. The time is now for all. And Birth of a Nation highlights the complexities of our nation in all its glories and gories. So conversations matter like Black Lives in Books, and I hope that this sparks one.